Let's talk breakdown of the regions here, guys. Mike, we'll start with you in the South. Kentucky and Baylor, we like that. We talked about that in our other video we did. But what else do you see in this? Is there some good matchups Thursday, Friday?
Yeah, I think so. I think Wichita State is, of all the so-called mid-major teams, I think Wichita State is the one that's the most highly regarded. I mean, some of these, again, with our advanced metrics, have like a top 10 team in the country, Wichita State.
Wow.
So they're interesting. I think their game with their potential second round game with Indiana is really interesting. But then they get fed to Kentucky, and I think Kentucky, especially what they do to you defensively, they're not that dependent on shooting the ball great or on the threes falling in, or they do what they do, and I think they're going to be a very tough out.
And in the East,
right,
Gordy, Syracuse, that 2-3 zone, and for some reason
makes me crazy that a team playing 2-3 zone can do what they do every year, but it works for them because it seems to me that that's a defense that can be attacked and has been attacked on every level known to man, but they make it work because they do some funky things out of it. They trap out of it. And they don't just sit in a 2-3 zone. They come out and they will attack you. So I think maybe it's a little bit of a misnomer to say they play a 2-3 zone because it's a little more than it looks like. So
they get a top seed there, but are they going to work their way out through?
This is the thing that is really mystified me throughout these last several months is Ohio State has sort of gotten put to the side, even though they have some potential pro players, and they could very well come out of this region. And you look down through that bracket, and you see other teams that have traditionally been pretty tough come tournament time. Like the Wisconsins and the Texases and the Gonzagas of the world. Also West Virginia. Traditionally these teams have done pretty well at this time of year. So I think it is a pretty interesting and competitive bracket. So I think there could be some upsets there.
It's one thing that frustrates me this year is I look at what you said about Wichita State, a 5 seed. I like a Vanderbilt over here at a 5. You mentioned Wisconsin as a 4. Usually I look for those 4 or 5 upsets because you guys have said in the past, we talked about this, there's usually some upsets in that 5-12, 4-13.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to figure them out so that usually if you have them having an upset, usually you have the top teams like a Kentucky coming out of there anyhow, so you can afford to make those calls.
Right.
I like Wichita State this year. I like Vanderbilt this year, so it's a little bit harder.
There is some of that. But on the other hand, Bucknell beating Kansas doesn't make any sense. You're not going to be able to look at the bracket and see that coming. So that's just that's what's fun about it.
Let's look at the West a little bit. What do you see coming out of there, Mike?
Well, Missouri is this really interesting, bizarre team, as we've talked about, and a potential second-round game with Marquette, which, weirdly enough, is probably the single team in the country that is most like this very unusual Missouri team. So that could be a lot of fun. That could be 94 feet flying around craziness. I think Michigan State is in pretty good shape. I like their bracket, and I like their matchup. Let's say they play Missouri in a regional final. I would like Michigan State in that game because of the way they rebound the ball against a very small team. I don't think they're going to be disrupted by pressure. They're so well coached and organized. So I have Michigan State going to New Orleans.
And in the Midwest, I think there's some really interesting matchups here.
Right, sure.
Carolina's a top seed, but there's some, I think, before.
Yeah, I like Carolina. I mean, I think they have, we've talked about the factor of having future pros, and I think Carolina's got a bunch of them. I mean, maybe Harrison Barnes hasn't had the year that a lot of people expected, but maybe part of that is the fact that he's had so many good players around him, and Carolina's system doesn't always allow the one guy to rise above the rest. I think he's a really talented kid. I think he'll be a really good pro. But he hasn't quite had the year, and so maybe they're still figuring some things out to some degree. But, I mean, it's hard for me to see anybody beating him in that bracket. I mean, Kansas is the 2 seed, and I don't think Kansas is as good as it's been, even last year. I mean, they lost the 2 Morris kids and, who knows who else. So I see Carolina come out of there. I just don't think anybody is capable of beating him in that bracket.
You mentioned system. Michael Jordan, of course, got held back a little bit by Dean Smith. Hansen, if he's healthy, he can make a big factor this year.
Sure.
Temple, can they do anything? Another 5-12 matchup. Is there an upset there or not?
Well, I mean, Mike has mentioned this, too, about Cal maybe being the team that comes out from the playing game beating South Florida to play Temple. Temple's got the guard play, and they got a great coach, so, they could ride that out of there. I mean, I don't know how far they ride it, but, I mean, I think they're a good team with, a lot of great attributes.
Okay, so who do you guys like here? That's Mike. What's your final 4?
My Final Four is Kentucky, Michigan State, Kansas. I like Kansas a little more than the rest of the panel, and I like Ohio. I couldn't agree more about Ohio State. And then I've got an Ohio State Kentucky final, and Kentucky winning it all.
Kentucky's going to win it all. Okay.
I think I generally agree with what Mike's got working there. I go Kentucky, Michigan State as well. I go Carolina, Ohio State. Probably Carolina, Kentucky, with Kentucky winning.
I'm going to put Kentucky. I just like the way it plays out for them. 3 freshmen in there. That's tough.
Yeah, that's tough.
I'm going to take Missouri to beat Michigan State. So I've got Kentucky, Missouri, Ohio State, and Carolina. And I have Missouri playing Ohio State. And the Buckeyes, with their pro potential and their players they have, winning the whole thing.
There you have it.
Wow.
Take it to the bank.